Hello, y'all. Welcome back. It's Dr. Nicole Truesdale here, and I am your host for this podcast, Abolitionist Dreamscape. So, welcome. And this is episode 2, y'all. We got episode 2 here. I want to first thank everybody who tuned in for episode 1, in which I talked about what Yemaya, the water, has taught me and is teaching me about freedom. So, all the likes and the comments are greatly appreciated. And I also want to say thank you to my patrons. I have a Patreon with the same name, Abolitionist Dreamscapes. I'll put that information down in the show notes for folks to be able to go to and subscribe. But my patrons really are a big support for me being able to continue to teach and create in the public, whether it be through my social media platforms like TikTok or YouTube and Instagram, or this platform here as a podcaster, being able to express my ideas and concepts around abolitionism and dreaming through a very Black queer lens. It is the support of those who are supporting my work that allow me to do so. So I want to give a special shout out to my patrons. And if you are interested in subscribing, go ahead. Again, I'll have the link in the show notes of how to do so. Now, today, let's get into it because I want to talk about pleasure. Now, last episode, if you were with me, I left off speaking about how being in this kind of state of flow that the water has been teaching me, it's really forced me to have to reconcile with my body. And so I want to kind of continue and expand upon that on this episode as the kind of process of me embodying my body, actually being in my body instead of disassociating by having my mind lead and telling me that whatever I was feeling could be put to the side. Now that I had to really let that go, I'm in my body. And so that process has been one that has really been teaching me a hell of a lot more about what it means to be human than I ever thought I would learn. And it's really funny because I'm an anthropologist by training, and I initially went into my discipline in the field of forensic biological. So I was actually working with human remains and the bones, and then I shifted over into my PhD, where I went much more sociocultural, looking at political legal anthropology. But the whole time, all of my research and to this day has really been about me understanding the concept of the human and humanity. But it was only until recently that I realized how much I was so out of my body that I was just observing what it meant to be human, honestly, not truly living it because it hurt. It really did hurt. And so as I have been on this kind of embodiment process that really is influenced by both astrology, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, but also my practice in Lukumi as a Orisha devotee, really working with Orisha, my ancestors, and astrology has really been probably the biggest teacher so far of me of what it means to be human, because both are really demanding that I be in my humanity. So what do I mean by that? Well, once I started really figuring out that I needed to kind of leave my marriage, leave my life, and really step into what it meant to be a over 40, late coming out, quote unquote, gay in life, I really started to have to ask myself, okay, then what do I really want? Like, what brings me pleasure? And not just sexually, but also emotionally, physically, spiritually. What is it that actually brings me pleasure? Because something that I started to really grapple with was that I didn't know that ideas of attraction, ideas of desires, ideas of pleasure itself were ones that I had really been filtered through a very kind of heteronormative, white, patriarchal, Christian based kind of lens, because I grew up going to Catholic school. I grew up in very institutionalized spaces that even when I left Catholicism, but had entered into academia, I just traded one religion for another, quite frankly. I traded one God of this idea of obedience to a higher power for another kind of obedience in institutional spaces through disciplines, right? Academic disciplines. And so when you really kind of break out of that institutionalized hold, which is what I call abolitionist movements, right? Because you're breaking foundational understandings of self that are tied to structure, that are tied to very oppressive reproductive type systems, right? What you start to realize is that, Lisa, what I started to realize was that I really had to get clear about what I actually wanted out of life, out of living, and therefore out of myself. And this is where astrology really came in. But before astrology was able to talk to me, it was honestly in my practice of working with Orisha that opened that door up for me. And again, last episode, I talk about Yemaya and the waters, but it wasn't just Yemaya that was speaking to me, it was also Oshun. And Oshun is another water Orisha of the sweet waters of the rivers. And she's also an Orisha to me that is heavily misunderstood and misused. And because she is somebody, or she is an entity, I should say, a primordial energy that reminds us that we are here on earth to experience humanity, to experience the abundance that is here for us, the sweetness of life, right? Because what is the point of coming down into a form that we call a human body to just have to constantly be suffering and only working for somebody else so that you may obtain glory in the afterlife? Like, that's a raw ass deal, y'all. Like, who taught us that, and how does that make any logical sense, right? So when I would used to go to my godfather in person when I lived in Rhode Island, there's a consistency in my readings, especially when I look back on them, because I'm still an academic and I'm still kind of a research dork. So I always took notes in all of my readings and consultations with my godfather. And honestly, it was a good practice for me to kind of track to make sure that I wasn't just going and asking and laying down offerings without really embodying what was being asked of me. So it truly was also an accountability for me to kind of track through how I was learning how to work with Orisha. So that first year to year and a half before the lockdowns happened, that I was working with my godfather and going and getting readings on a fairly consistent basis, Oshun was consistently coming down. Now, again, Oshun does not have my head either. I'm not ruled by the water, by my head. The water supports my feet, but does not rule my head. So there was a way that when she was coming down, it was a consistency, and her messages were always essentially, baby, you have got to kind of start to learn how to love yourself. And so what do you really want? What brings you pleasure? She was really asking me this for a good amount of time from 2019 on. And so, but again, I was still focused on this idea of freedom, and even that being tied to pleasure of just leaving a job and trying to get something else that maybe allowed me more flexibility, but I really hadn't embodied it. Well, then this past kind of 18 months, we have been in what we call a nodal transit, that is essentially the parts of the moon that are mathematical calculations that, depending upon what kind of astrology you're into and how you understand life and past lives and reincarnation, the south node is essentially where we came from, either past lives or what we're coming into this kind of life having a foundation in. And our north node is where we're trying to go, the kind of head of the dragon, where the south node's the tail of the dragon. The head of the dragon is a place that we're striving for, that we're trying to learn in this life, that we may or may not obtain. But the more we try to at least lean into that kind of those kind of underlying desires by taking the lessons from our south node with us and transmuting them toward that new goal, that's a way we can learn how to work with the energies of our chart, one way, especially through esoteric astrology. Well, the last 18 months, the south node has been in Scorpio, the north node has been in Taurus. And this will all make sense in a minute, so keep rolling with me, y'all. Keep rolling with me. So I'm a Scorpio rising, but I also have a Taurus moon. And the last 18 months has really been, and so it's a first house and seventh house conversation happening. We have 12 houses in our chart, but the first and seventh house are the house of self and the house of one-on-one relationships. They're very foundational to our sense of self and how we engage in the world, right? So the last 18 months has really been a big purge for me, purging the kind of south node of my sense of self in Scorpio and that old sense of self that I had been holding on to, the sense of self that Oshun had been laying the groundwork along with the other Orisha that would come and speak to me when I would go to my godfather and get readings to help me understand that I had to release not just the job, I had to release the concept of my sense of self that had confined me to only seeing myself as needing to release a job. I hope y'all are rolling with me here at this logic, right? So that kind of groundwork, that kind of love, that kind of forceful, because it was a bit forceful many times with Oshun, but in a loving and beautiful way of, no, leave all that other mess alone and really come right with you. The last 18 months was really the actual process of doing that, because I had to purge everything everything about me. I had to purge the ideas of who I thought I was, which meant that I thought I was straight. I thought I was going to be in a marriage till I died. I was really committed to this idea of just toughing it out, y'all. And that's not a healthy mentality to have when you're in relationships that do not serve you and or the other person, quite frankly, because neither one of you can actually be open and free in that, right? So all of that kind of identities that I had was fixated on. Because again, Scorpio is a fixed sign that can go deep, but we must learn how to flow. And if we don't flow, we just stop ourselves up. I really had to let that go and come into a better relationship with myself. So that one-on-one relationship in that seventh house of Taurus, and Taurus again is a Venus ruled sign, and it's the materiality, it's the embodiment, it's the embodying of being in a body and what that means in our connection to the earth, because it also rules, money itself as well. There is a way that Oshun, right, was speaking to me previously, and that translated into Venus, because Oshun and Venus have a relationship. I know we use a lot of the Greek philosophers and the Greek deities and Roman deities to personify the planets, but really they're not the only ones. And so for me, Oshun's energy is very Venetian, especially since Oshun is a warrior and also as one of the marketplace, since in Ifa, there is an understanding that the marketplace is a feminine space that is really all ruled by feminine powers, right? So, Yemaya, Oshun, and the like. Oya. So there was a way this last 18 months, I was really with the energies, all of us were asked to embody ourselves in one way, shape, or form. So if you felt the past 18 months that who you are or how you operate is completely shifted, and there's a much sense of reality in terms of your materiality and whatever that means, for me, it was literally the body itself and really understanding that I'm here to experience a human experience. And part of that, it's a messy one, but it is one that you have to be in the body. And so what happens if I let my body lead in my relationship with self? What would I do? Well, y'all, damn, I woke the hell up. I woke up and it's like my body's alive now. Like I literally feel as if I'm 6'3", and I feel like the last few months is when I can actually feel my height, where I'm actually like in my body and I feel taller. And there's also a way that I realized, that in this kind of embodiment process that I really didn't understand what the hell brought me pleasure. Like I did, but I didn't. So what I've been doing the past few months is really exploring these ideas through various means, right? And so I've been doing it through classes. I've been doing it through like dating, and experimenting with my own fashion and how I feel, what makes me feel good in my body. And then also through actual body work. So let me go through those three things that I've been doing. So classes are first, right? So pleasure classes. I've actually taken a class on pleasure, and it was led by a Black woman who's kind of a coach, executive coach, who does these kind of seminars on the side because she also used to own a pole dancing class. And so I initially found the pleasure class because I was in pole class. Starting in May. Now, this has been a really interesting experience, y'all, because I'm a former athlete, and I'm going to talk about that next episode about my body, about the body itself, and what that really has been as a tall Black woman. But for the purpose of this podcast, for this episode, my body has really been one in which I'm so used to beating it up on a court, right? And so I decided that I wanted to learn how to like not be so stiff, because I realized that because of being an ex-athlete and going and doing like volleyball and then CrossFit and kettlebells and all the like, that my joints are really stiff. Like my back is stiff, my hip is stiff, everything's stiff. So I thought, okay, if I wanted to experience pleasure, I wanted it to be a little sexy, because like I realized that I had really turned off my sense of sensuality and sexuality. So when it kind of lit back on, when I realized I was gayer than shit, I realized that there was a sensuality that I wanted to embody in my body. So I started taking pole classes. Y'all, these pole classes taught me so many things. And it is one that I am not made for a pole, at least right now. Like, I went to this pole class and I tried it twice because they had intro 4 sessions, like a 4 session intro kind of class deal that you had to go through in order to be a part of the studio's membership. So the first time I did it, I signed up for the 4 blocks, and I went to the first pole class. Almost died. Not gonna lie, didn't realize I had abs there. The warm up was killing me, and then we learned some basic kind of like moves, like how to walk around the pole, and then how to do a little bit of a lift. Right. Well, my ass realized something very quickly. That whole like sensual, like make your back move. My back is so damn straight and stiff. I look like a damn pterodactyl trying to walk around that pole all sexy. And then as I was trying to pull, I was so in my head because I felt so awkward on the pole that I literally pulled my damn lat. So when I went back to the second class, it was so damn sore that I couldn't lift up. And then I realized I couldn't do anymore. So I ended up having to go to the chiropractor, doing a bunch of massage, body work. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because that was actually really helpful. But then I decided, okay, I'm a fixed sign. I decided I can still do this. So I took a month off and then signed up again for their intro classes, thinking, okay, this time I'm going to be a little bit looser. I've been having my massage and my chiropractic, practice. I should be able to do it. Y'all know that the second time around, by the second class, the same thing, like my upper body, my shoulder, it wasn't that I had pulled it. It was just fatigued, and it was trying to talk to me saying, girl, we don't want to do this. Like, we don't want to be on a pole. You enjoy watching somebody on a pole. That does not mean you have to be on the pole yourself. And so I realized, touche, this is good to know. And so, but from the pole class is how I found the pleasure class. So when I went to the pleasure class, it was a few months ago. And I remember this because it was on one of the full moons. I can't remember which one. I want to say the Taurus full, no, that was a new moon. So I want to say between the Taurus new moon and the Cancer new moon, sometime around there, y'all. Don't really matter. But I remember it being on a moon cycle that I went to this pleasure class, and the class was we did a little bit of light pole work, but it was nothing kind of crazy or anything. But it was really about us having space with other women to be comfortable enough to explore the concept of what pleasure is to us. And it was everything from financial to spiritual to physical to home to sexual to everything in between. And that exercise really was really foundational for me in terms of having me see how far I had really allowed myself to come into my body, because I was reflecting in that floor, like I would have never done something like that even 6 months ago. And even when I first saw the initial email, my mind initially said, hell no, I'm not doing that, right? Talking about these intimate things in a space people I don't know. But when I let it sit in my body and came back to the email, my body was like, yeah, why don't you try it? Because we need you to keep opening up yourself to these types of conversations with yourself. So that class and those classes have been really great for me because I realized it's not what I really want. And so being in those pole classes and thinking about what sensuality and sexuality and sexy means, I had to kind of look at myself and ask more deeper questions about how heteronormativity, I'm still holding on to parts of that, and how can I learn to be more comfortable in my expression of my femininity and my masculinity too. But I'm much more, quite frankly, feminine in nature, with my masculinity kind of supporting that. I'm really trying to figure out what does that really mean in practice for me as I sit even more comfortably in my body. And so this has really gotten into the next thing I want to talk about, which is like my dating and fashion, because there's a way now, as we're in summertime, it's Leo season. Venus is right now been in Leo for a while, going to be in Leo to the end of September, but she's retrograding. And so Leo rules my 10th house. It's also where my sun is in my North Node. So there's a way right now I've been really reviewing, okay, as I'm starting to date again, how do I want to appear? Like, how am I want to show up in the world in my fashion that expresses it, so that also when I'm on dates, it's very clear, right? This is me. In one capacity through my appearance, because I realized when I first started dating last summer, I kind of jumped on in jumped on in as a baby gay into the world of queer dating, lesbian dating, there was a way that I realized I was very self-conscious because I was entering into a new community. I was going to be dating a new gender, right? Or people identified in this gender. And I was really trying to understand what that even meant for me. But I was also hyper aware of how, even in queer spaces, one can really be labeled very quickly, right? So you've got the labels of stud or stem or femme. Then you have ideas of top, bottom, switch, all the thing in between. And I was so self conscious because I did not want to be put into another box. I did not want to be labeled, that I was always, I realized not always, but majority of the times I was hyper conscious of what I was wearing in response to being perceived in a certain way. That wasn't really healthy because I wasn't necessarily then embodying me. I was responding to an imaginary box that may have been put upon me, right? So it was really a trigger. It was really triggering. It was really me working through a big transition in my life. So looking upon that now, right, a year later, I can give myself a hell of a lot more grace and understand why and how I was moving. But right now, I'm much more clear that fuck all that noise. I didn't break out of boxes to be put back into any. So I can't allow the perception or what I think a perception will be to really stop me from figuring out what I like and how I want to dress and act. So there's a way I've been playing with my fashion, and I found out some things, y'all. I found out that I like a nice fit. And by that, I mean, I like a nice slit in my skirt. I like showing some thigh when it makes sense. I like a kind of form fitting top, but I also love me a white button up in all kinds of sizes. I like a good two-piece set, whether it be a jumpsuit or pants in a shirt or a skirt and a tube top. I'm realizing that I like more of fashion that allows me to show off parts of my body and also allows me the ability to kind of flow in and out of different type of silhouettes. And that's been really helpful for me because I'm now figuring out that my body likes to be seen in ways that allow me to kind of control what parts are being shown versus kind of reacting to how I think I will be seen. I hope that makes sense. And then the third thing, though, that's been really helpful because what it allows me to kind of get into and understand what my body is feeling, it has been a lot of the body work I've been doing, especially the past few months. So this has really been foundational for me to understand what brings me pleasure because I had to understand first what was bringing me pain. And I had a lot of pain in my body, and I'm still working through chronic pain. I have a slip disc that I happened in my early 20s when I was playing volleyball, actually over in Ireland during study abroad, that slipped a L4 disc, pinched my L4 nerve. And so I've had kind of a loss of full sensation in my right leg since I was 20. And I'm 41 right now, about to be 42. And I also have had up and down bouts of muscle atrophy and like I couldn't walk for a week at one point. And so now I've got also pins and needles sometimes in the foot, and the hip can get really tired very quickly. So even with all of that, I still played a season of college volleyball on this hip and back. I was crossfitting. I tried to do half marathons. So I really had trained myself to ignore the pain of my body and I kind of convinced myself that I could kind of quote unquote overcome it. This is internalized ableism, y'all. Like I can heavily admit that. That was completely internalized ableism because I never gave my body the ability to heal and rest because it had been disabled. Literally, I could not walk. And there's ways that I'm still suffering consequences from my inability to give my body the care and rest it needed, but also acknowledging that there was no way society was also going to allow me that care and rest I needed. Because when I actually did express and tell coaches and doctors and colleagues, bosses that I was in these types of pains, I essentially was dismissed, had repercussions for even trying to address it, or was told that I could overcome it, right? So there's complications with that. But now it's 41, right? And again, about to be 42. There's no way that I can ignore a lot of this anymore because it's just too acute. And again, I got into my body. So now there is no way that I can really ignore her. Because in order for me to do so would mean that I have to literally disassociate again. And that's something that I really don't want to do and can do anymore. So The South Node is now in Libra, like I said earlier in the episode or in the show, and there's a way that the Venus's other sign of Libra now being highlighted in what we're letting go in the South Node. There's ways that we have to let go individually and collectively these ideas that we try to balance in ourselves about what it means to kind of be a quote unquote good person, what is really justice, right, for ourselves and one another. We got to let this go because there was an unhealthiness of society that told us to literally deny ourselves our experiences and who we are in favor of dominant narratives that told us that that was what justice was. That is what, essentially what we should be desiring and being attractive to. We're really being asked to let all that go and reevaluate. And so for me, I've had to really let go of this idea that my mind can overcome my body, because there is no reason for our minds to be leading our bodies when we are supposed to be body led, because we are human beings, right? Not human doers. And so the body work I've been doing has been, like I said earlier, chiropractic care, but also I've been doing a lot of massage. I've actually started doing yoni steams as well, just to have time and space with myself and really heal parts of my womb, because I did have a traumatic birth when I gave birth that had some really harsh healing afterwards. I never even really healed from giving birth to my child 8 years ago. So all of these ways that I denied my body healing have now come up in a honestly graceful way for myself, because it's like, okay, when I try to do something like a pole classing dance, that's really a way for me to escape the reality that what my body wants and needs right now is a lot of rest and care. It wants gentleness. Long walks are about as much as I can really do right now. And it's really about having somebody else help me move my muscles and move my joints, because they've been locked up for so long. There's a way that now I'm in a one-on-one relationship, going back to this kind of seventh house Taurus energy for me that's still there, because Jupiter is still transiting there until next year. I'm now having to have different one-on-one relationships with healers and those who in different healing modalities, because I need help in this kind of body care, because I'm realizing that does bring me pleasure. But that pleasure is a sense that my body is actually starting to believe me when I say that I really do want my freedom. And so I'm willing to abolish all of the systems and structures that I bought into that denied me that, because I want to be a human being and not a human doer. So those are my thoughts on pleasure, y'all. I'm going to stop there and just know that I have another aspect of this topic on my Patreon, actually exclusive for patrons at the landscape level or higher. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how I think about pleasure from a kind of a different aspect, as I talk more there about how music, particularly Janelle Monáe's new album, and honestly, ideas of sex have really been another part of my pleasure journey, go ahead to Patreon, subscribe there. But as always, I really appreciate the support. Check out the show notes for different ways you can work with me. I do astrology readings one-on-one. I also offer deconstruction sessions for folks who are on their deconstruction journey from any type of institutional space, along with other ways you can work with me, because I also provide services for organizations who are looking to kind of reshift and look through their foundations through a more abolitionist lens. And I will be offering future group sessions with me. So check out my website for that as well. And come back in about 2 weeks, because episode 3, I'm going to get more into the concept of the body, but the body through a very abolitionist Black queer lens, as we kind of talk through and deconstruct this idea of what it means to actually be human, especially when we're getting all these ideas that that there are other life forms out there, with the US now saying that they confirm or somewhat confirm that there are aliens. What does that really mean when we are all, quite frankly, alien to our own humanity? All right. So join me in about 2 weeks for that one. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.